Is data analysis the key to all success on the internet? Today on Untapped, we're unpacking the digital universe with Ken Rona, the wizard behind the curtain of ad tech's most magical algorithms. It's like if Silicon Valley had a baby with Mad Men. Let's get going and learn more than you did yesterday.
Welcome to the Untapped Show, where marketing, media, and ad tech merge. Stay tuned as your host, Pesach Lattin, navigates you through the evolving landscape of marketing trends and advertising innovations.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP is a true legal
I'm
powerhouse.
Pesach, this is the Untapped Show. We're here with Kenneth Rona, the chief scientist of Simulmedia.
It's a great title, right?
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about it. I wasn't sure if you were chief data scientist or chief scientist, but I love it. It says it all right then.
Yeah, someone has a thing about like it is just science. Dave Morgan, the founder, has a opinion about it, and I love it. I love the title. It makes me sound like I'm more mathematic and like almost like biochemistry. And I got thank you for it sounds more impressive than I think I am. So thank you.
So today we're going to talk about data. I guess you are the guy who likes turning cookies into cookie dough in the post-digital kitchen. And when I mention data or data science, your name always comes up. You, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I got it early.
So first, I want to really talk about the evolution and revolution of programmatic media, because obviously data is one of the most important parts, and it changed the game when it came to advertising. In the world of programmatic media, where many proclaim themselves kings, you actually built a castle. From your vantage point, though, what has been the most unexpected plot twist in the narrative of programmatic media?
Yeah, first I'll say I was lucky in that I got to build up a real one of the first digital online. I was repetitive. One of the first digital data assets. So I built the IXI solution, and largely I think what we built, now 12, 15 years ago, I think still forms the backbone of that solution that got sold to Equifax. I benefit from really seeing the data side from the very beginning. But my interests are really around using the data to optimize. From my mind, there are, I don't think I have like one thing, but I think I have 12. But the two that really stick out for me are that we're still discussing if a machine is better at running a campaign than a person. This point's been proven. But a previous company not that long ago, we did a bake-off between a competitor who I think is really solid and an agency team who wanted to get in the game around who was going to optimize a campaign better. And both the company and the competitor just destroyed the agency team. I mean, the agency team wasn't even in the game. It wasn't even versus playing the Athletics and the Yankees. And so you think that that the agencies would be running towards these programmatic solutions, these optimization solutions, things based on AI, machine learning, and what's crazy is they aren't. Which is the second thing. The kind of twist in my mind is that the agencies, they really don't want to have much to do with machine-based optimization unless they're really forced to.
Right.
As was explained to me, they're not really employing technologies that make them look bad. The campaign performance dramatically improves. They're like, oh, sorry, we should have done this 5 years ago. They don't want to have that discussion with the client. The second part is that it leads to, they don't want to have less FTEs, right? They bill on those. And so, at other companies, we had chased big agencies and we almost always got this line, like, we know that people are worse and we're okay with that, right? So the kind of not client-led story is one that kind of always bothers me.
So you're saying that the traditional billing models are inhibiting innovation?
100%. I don't know if it's talked about. I'm not. I live in Atlanta, so I'm not kind of plugged in to the folks. So I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I would say that's absolutely true.
Can you explain that a little bit more and explain what FTEs are and how it doesn't work in programmatic?
Sure. So here's my understanding of it, right? And so I've never been in an agency, but I've worked with people who ran big digital agencies, and the story I got was, we would go to a client, we'd pitch them 150 full-time equivalents, which is to say we're going to put 150 people on the account, and then they bill them for the 150 people plus some margin, and all that's transparent. And so if you come in with a labor-saving technology that decreases their need for FTEs, that gets rid of that margin, right? If you go say, oh, look, we don't need those 10 traders, we're doing it algorithmically now, programmatically. Or I should say, using AI. Let's say that way.
Right.
We save 10 FTEs, and so the agency then doesn't get to bill on that margin, so that decreases their income and their revenue, right? And so they don't want to do that. What we found was smaller agencies were really a better place to kind of play, because they were very interested in being able to displace the incumbents.
Some say that if a trend towards performance-based billing, that is, could actually revolutionize agency incentives. What do you think about that?
Oh, I love that. I think that the question I have is, how do you define performance? So, in my new rule, performance is about, it's Simulmedia. It's what started out as a linear ad network, now is doing CTV. But the thing that Simulmedia promises is impressions. But we also try to get reach, right? We try to get incremental reach. And so then the question is, who's measuring performance and how are they measuring it? And so I'm all for the performance stuff. I mean, that's kind of my bread and butter. But I do have a fairly expansive view on that, right? So you got to be really crystal clear as to how it's measured, and which means that the infrastructure that you need to build, the way that you optimize, right, to a particular signal, has to be pretty generalized if you kind of don't know what it is, right? If you vary depending on the advertiser.
All right, reflecting on the seismic shifts, what's the one facepalm moment in the industry you didn't see coming?
Oh, I gotta say, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, am I turning red? The MFA thing was surprising to me. My focus has really been on, the optimization of a thing, right? How do we pay the right for that inventory? And my argument had always been, well, I don't really care if it's the algorithm's going to figure it out. But the MFA, and I think that to some extent that's still true. But once I started to kind of look at the made for advertising sites, I was, frankly, I said I was embarrassed that we had been buying them at all. The quality of the sites are just so abysmally low. You probably shouldn't spend a penny on them. Of course, there's a sustainability argument, right? You're buying crap that doesn't really, it often gets sold indirectly. There's a lot of hops. Brian O'Kelly, I think rightly so, is focused on helping get rid of that. But in my mind, the thing that I think I'm a fairly honest person. I think I have a reputation of transparency and honesty. And so the thing that got me really angry about the MFA is that if you go to an MFA site directly, right? If you type in the URL and you go to a site,
it looks like a legit site.
It looks
I saw one. I clicked on a Outbrain or Taboola ad, and it went to like this horrible weight loss thing. But I went to the site; it was this really beautiful wedding site, and it's supposed to be a registry and stuff.
Exactly.
But the click itself was about how some celebrity lost weight, injecting bleach into their veins or something.
Yeah, well, and it's no surprise, right? They have to pay for the Taboola, Outbrain link, right? I mean, that's how those publishers have to pay for it, so they put a ton of ads on the site. But when you go there, they know they're doing something wrong. If it's like super clean but you click on the link and it's just this mess. If I had known about that, I would have made a more concerted effort to just block that stuff right away.
Did they manipulate do you think they manipulated data? Like they realized that if you get a lot of clicks and you get a lot of views, that some networks are going to show those more. They're going to pay more. That is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing I do believe is, the other piece of that, right, is I just assume those people are more susceptible to click fraud. And so, of course, I'm not a fan of using clicks to measure something.
Have you heard about the companies are exploring blockchain technology as a potential solution to ensure authenticity?
No, tell me more.
It's actually just a note on my. I thought I'll just cut that question out. You don't want to look like a complete idiot.
I knew just enough to ask the question, but not to have an idea what the answer was.
Well, I have all my notes, and I was like, oh, I read somewhere about blockchain. It's like,
no. I'm actually quite I wouldn't say pessimistic about blockchain, but when I looked at it a while ago,
Right.
it was really slow. I mean, the volume of data that a typical company I work for consumes so much data that like we would use all the blockchain capacity in the entire world just to write the log files, right? I mean, it's just the capacity of.
Well, yeah, having to do a verification each time.
Yeah.
For each call to the server would be crazy. I mean, I don't know how many bytes it is on 256, but for the normal blockchain, but that would be huge.
Yeah.
Back and forth. It's already big enough. I mean, we don't need more.
Yeah. well, and to give you a sense of it, I mean, the volumes. This was something that I'll just say at Chalice, we would often make the comparison. Like the volumes of data that people are dealing with in programmatic are so past what you're dealing with, unless you're in the airplane business and you have sensors all over the airplane, right? Or if you're drilling oil wells, and you're collecting a lot of sensor data. In programmatic, because you the volumes of data, like if you said, hey, here's how much data is collected at a farmer's market, typical farmer's market on a Sunday. And then you locate, let's say, here's the continuum, right? And then if you said, okay, where does the amount of data that's generated from the New York Stock Exchange, where does that wind up? And it winds up kind of here, right?
Right.
Like, it's actually so close to the farmer's market as to be unmeasurable. And then you say, hey, where is programmatic? Where's the amount of data generated programmatically? It's like way out here. I mean, frankly, we had to like crank down the scale because we couldn't even fit it on the page. So
wait, someone made a point though. Do we need all that data? And I brought up now in 3 shows the same thing. Do we really need data on left-handed jugglers, for example?
Oh, well, different. So I'm less of a fan of
right,
enormous.
Because there's no reach for some of this data.
Right. That's right. 100%.
Is that part of the problem? Are we creating these niche data segments that really?
No, the data I'm talking about is really in the log files. And so when you're generating, when you buy something programmatically, there are basically three log file entries that get generated, right? And then a bunch of other kind of ancillary things, right? So this isn't complete, but this is a reasonable way to think about it. You get what's called an auction log, which is all the auctions that were kind of floating around in a given moment. You then have the bid log, which is what you as a buyer were bidding on, right? So that's a subset, and then you have a further subset of the win, right? So the win log. And so the first log is so big. I mean, the guys at Beeswax say we kind of as a company only save our auction logs for 24 hours and cycle them through. We only save them for in case there's an emergency. We got to figure something out, right? And so
they don't have how much data center they would need to store that would be ridiculous.
Yeah, it would be ridiculous, right? They just couldn't do it. And even the bid logs are quite big. So the auction logs are enormous. At other companies, we've really only ever used the win logs. That has been enough. To kind of get good signal. But so the volumes are vast. And so now what you're talking about is additional features, right?
Right.
So you're saying, hey, what about the other segments? I 100% agree. I wrote a LinkedIn post today, just coincidentally. I looked at, when I was at Ignition 1, I looked at I think it was Experian or Equifax, like their number of segments. And at the time it was like 9,000 segments. That's not, no one could buy. Do you know what the paradox of choice is?
Right. Yeah.
It's like the paradox of choice. Like it's distinguished. Yeah. So I'm in some ways I'm a convert.
But what's the reach on some of these choices? Anyway? I think people keep on bringing that up. Is that we keep on mining data with no reach.
Yeah, nothing. Which is why I like the bid logs, right? So if you're using the win logs or whatever, the log files, it has 150 typically 150 features on any given programmatic impression. Right, that's actually enough. And you get rid of a bunch of that. Maybe there are 30 that matter. That's like a very reasonable set of features to get signal from. The 9,000, and you get it on every single impression. And there's actually older data science research from Google that says you're better off with fewer features and more data collected, which was the play, as opposed to keep adding new features, right, and new crazy left-handed cat lovers kind of thing.
everyone's talking obviously about AI now, and all the buzzwords, machine learning, you know, LLM, and programmatic buying. Can you share a eureka moment where the technologies truly changed the game for you?
Oh yeah. So when, I go back a bit. So I had a meeting when I was at AOL with X plus one, and I didn't really understand the programmatic marketplace at all. I didn't even really know it existed. At AOL, my job was I had the team that would send people the CD-ROMs. So you're welcome. Uh,
Yeah, I mentioned another show. They were great frisbees.
yeah. And we would typically send you 7 frisbees a year. Like that was kind of the goal. But we I was in this meeting about about how should we market our own products, and X plus one was the vendor that we were using, and so they explained this whole programmatic media thing. And I'm like, oh, that's how it's going to happen now in the future. Like that was kind of my eureka moment. Was I guess now, oh gosh, it had to have been 17 years ago, I guess 15 years ago, something like that. Where I was like, oh well, clearly this is how people are going to buy media, and it's so backward right now that this is clearly the direction it's going to go in. And since then, I will just candidly say, my experience at Chalice was directly influenced by I then went to X plus one to work there. I was like, oh, these guys know what they're doing. I went to work there, and as I learned about programmatic, I was convinced that like at X plus one we were just limited by the technology. And so I tried to kind of recreate something like that at Ignition One, and we just couldn't pull it off. There was just too much existing infrastructure and kind of cultural stuff going on. But then when we founded Chalice, Adam and I had actually aligned on that. He had a vision of being able to create custom algorithms based on what he saw the cutting edge clients doing, and I was like, oh, I've always wanted to build X plus one using the newest technology. I won't say build it properly, but build it with much fewer constraints, right? And so that was kind of let's call it 15 years ago, directly led to Chalice.
Programmatic media is a huge labyrinth of challenges. Is there a specific minotaur that you think needs slaying?
Gosh, you got to get the one that is coming to mind, and I hesitate because I worry that it may be a little flavor of the monthy. But I've been saying for I guess a couple of years now, like we're going to have to deal with the identity graph issue. Apple and Google both have taken steps to protect privacy. They're super self-serving. I don't mind privacy protection, but
Right.
And I don't even mind self-serving. I mean, that's kind of business. But the problem is that their solutions are going to cause problems for the publishers, right? It's just the basic economics of the internet. So the fact that they're protecting privacy, but they're going to destroy news. In my mind, this is the thing that one has to tackle. And I say identity graph as being the thing that we got to work out, is because that's what lets people, like, there's some basic use cases that rely on a good identity graph. For example, retargeting or frequency capping, right? Like you need to know who someone is. Now, do you need to know a lot about them? No, but you need some basic information. And I know there's this IAB report. They have a lot of use cases, more so than I'm laying out. The problem is, like, I think as Google says, no, we're not going to support this use case, or they make it very difficult.
Right.
It's just going to raise costs, right? Everyone's going to have to. Some of the solutions they're proposing technically possible, but you wouldn't want to do it, right? It's going to be very cumbersome and going to require a lot of trial and error. I would ask them, like, yeah. So I would love to see the business case, right? To see, like, hey, if we get rid of these use cases, here's how much revenue is going to get lost in the ecosystem, and how does that get replaced, right? Or does it? Maybe it doesn't. It's going to, I don't want to say nuclear winter it, but it's going to wipe out a lot of people.
Moving on, data science is often viewed through purely a technical lens, but some also see it as a canvas for creativity. Where have you painted outside the lines to create something unexpected?
Yeah. So thank you for thinking that I do. The example that I can think of is, I'd say I'm at my best when I can kind of take 2 or 3 different things, different data sets, my knowledge of the technical capabilities of the data science, libraries and various infrastructure pieces now, and smash them together in an interesting way. And at a previous company, we had a client. They wanted to optimize up to an offline metric, and the problem with the offline metric stuff is that it's not available in the bid stream, right? There are things there are kind of hacks you can pull off, but I'm
Right.
really happy with this one. I had done a thorough reading of the Trade Desk API documentation. Frankly, I'm surprised that I don't get more phone calls from those people. I know I was hot in that thing. Still hack it. I still hack that infrastructure.
They didn't call you and say they were getting these weird calls coming in or something?
Oh yes.
Like, we don't know what these strings are.
I have a story. I don't want to attribute it to any particular company, but the story was that some of the stuff that we were doing was using, their line was, you're using 20% of all of our compute.
Oh wow.
So we were misusing. I'm not going to attribute that to anybody. But the clever thing I think that I came up with was, I realized that, look, we could actually use what they have. They have something called user scoring in Trade Desk, and so we could take the offline data, marry it with other offline data, build a good predictive model to come up with a probability, right? Just a probabilistic model that someone would likely convert, right? Or actually, in this case, I'll say convert. And then we could bring that data into the Trade Desk. Literally, we'd score every single person in the United States that we could, everyone with a cookie, right? We scored, and then we push the cookie with the scores into the Trade Desk, and then we'd use something called a bid model, and we'd figure out what pricing, right, we should offer for a given piece of inventory. And that was enormously successful, right? And so the thing that there was a bunch of kind of intellectual leaps, right, that me and my colleagues had to make. I'd say largely, I think people would agree that I drove that, but I would kind of say, hey, I think we could do this, and then the poor folks who work for me would try to figure out how to do it, and then we'd go back and forth. But that was, I think, a very creative solution and super successful. Right. I know the client was super happy with it, and and continues to be so.
Was there ever a moment where the data lied to you or told you a different story?
Oh, it happens every day, but not
really. Like, you just get surprised, like, oh my gosh, like you never figured something out, and it just popped in your mind.
Yeah. So the one that the one that's more interesting, right, is where it's counterintuitive, right? Where you're like, oh, and it leads to something good. That's harder. What is more the case is that when you're running a model, that the data that you're like, oh, this absolutely has to predict, right? Let's say you're predicting just conversion, right? This data has to predict conversion. How could age and gender not predict conversion? And then it doesn't. And you're like, well, what is going on there, right? And so that leads to a deeper understanding of what's happening. And so that I said that kind of lack of predictive power. And my PhD is in behavioral economics. I'm a trained econometrician. I think hard about, like, when a feature is not in a model because it's necessarily predictive, I want to understand why. And so the thing that I think a lot about is why is domain in the model? And I think most data scientists are like, well, it's predictive, so it is, right? I'm like, no, it's predictive because it reflects context, right? It reflects, it has an audience. There is contextual information there, and so there's kind of what I'll call latent variables behind each feature that I think are really important to understand. And so that's the part that, like, when I get surprised, I try to think about, well, what is really happening there, and that kind of leads me to a deeper understanding of the whole ecosystem and what we should try in the future. Full stop.
Yeah, for those, everyone wants like actual insights. What's been your biggest aha moment?
I'd say two. One is there's a lot of, especially right now, there's a lot of hubbub about neural networks, and I'll distinguish that from AI. A neural network is just a particular technology, but it's the one that's used in LLMs. And so what's I think really interesting is from my perspective, it's actually the last resort. Like, we typically only go to a neural network if all else fails. They're hard to use. They require specialized skills. They're fairly costly to create. I found the MLs are the machine learning models, so things like XGBoost, CatBoost. those are more reliable and kind of more appropriate for most of what I do. So the big aha was just because something's getting a lot of attention, right? Like that, like you really do need to match the method to the problem. I'm not sure that answers your question perfectly, but that's what I'm going with.
What's your favorite technique or tool?
Oh, I a long time ago now, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking to someone at the not trade desk. It was at Beeswax, and he said, "Oh, we use Cat Boost," and
right,
so
which has nothing to do with shooting cats in the air, right? It's not a new Elon Musk project.
No, funny. I haven't heard that before. So Cat Boost is a machine learning algorithm. There are other people may have heard of XGBoost or Random Forest, but Cat Boost handles when you have a lot of values in a categorical variable. So they call it. I always want to say granularity, but that's not the phrase. Cardinality. When you have a lot of cardinality in a feature, so a column has a lot of values. So imagine something like URL, right? URL has in a big file, like could be 200, 300, 400,000 URL, different values of URLs, right? Whereas gender has 2 values, right? Example, age has 100 values, right?
Right.
Something like that. Right, but it's more limited, right? You have fewer choices, or above and below the fold, 2 choices. So Cat Boost does a really nice job of handling analyses when you have a lot of features. I mean, not certainly the 20,000 that would be, or 100,000 that'd be a lot for it, but it's a really good way to just kind of get going, and then from there you can start to refine the models, and you can use other techniques. But I like using Cat Boost because it really tells you where to start, and it simplifies things. Otherwise, you got to do all this what's called data engineering to deal with the cardinality, and it always feels very cumbersome. So I like that Cat Boost has kind of solved that problem for you largely. Full stop. And then I go to feature importances, and then the last thing, which I think I've gotten pretty good at, there's something called a SHAP value, and so I've gotten very clever about using SHAP values, which is an output of the models.
Okay, everyone's obviously talking about cookies, and we're like at this major crossroads. How do you envision the path forward? And frankly, are we even close to being ready?
Path forward. Well, what I would say is I'm ready. So CTV, which is my new job up, is in large part 20% of the job is CTV now. Largely transacts on IP addresses, right? And so to the extent that IP addresses are available, we're good. But I have a pretty good sense of if IP addresses no longer become available, which Google is talking about. I have a pretty good sense of where we're going. But if I were in display world, I'd be more concerned, right? Certainly the folks who I know who are in display side are thinking hard about it. I'm actually not super worried about Privacy Sandbox. I think the EU regulators are going to kill it. It's just too complex and into the ecosystem, and it's not really well accounted for yet, as I talked about. But I do think the threat of using cookies has led to what I'd call a Cambrian explosion of people building potential solutions. I'm kind of agnostic as to which solution people should go with. If I were still in that business, I would think about building a graph of graphs, right? I'd start combining, which I've done this kind of thing before on the feature side. You kind of select the best gender feature, the best performing gender feature from one vendor, then fill in the gaps, then the next vendor. And I think largely that's what we're going to see with identity.
Everyone's talking about first-party data. What's your strategy for striking it rich without striking out?
Yeah, so I do like first-party data as signal. I like to predict on that, right? That's the thing that I want to predict too. But I talked a little bit about this earlier. It's not super useful in programmatic as inputs to the model. You can't decision on it directly. It's not available in the bid stream stuff with beeswax, and then you can kind of hot wire it up. But my general thesis for my career has been that you're going to need to optimize your buys to a signal. So in some cases that signal's impressions. Might be reach, might be order size, whatever. So my strategy is to design systems and processes that are kind of indifferent to what the signal is. We're really agnostic. I wanna be able to. I'm gonna tell a story. I actually was inspired by a company
I have
called
one question. Can you stay longer?
Oh yeah,
Okay, we'll just keep going then.
right. You'll edit it to cut out the stupid parts. Um,
I
the
keep the stupid parts. I love the stupid parts. Little
the
comments, but
Well, and actually, I'm actually pleased that in the whole discussion, I think I've only said two things that I'm like, not sure I would have said that. But I'm like, that's like for me, that's like, it's
you weren't asking why Dave Morgan stayed in Ukraine. Yet.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I just interviewed him yesterday about it. It's just amazing.
Yeah. No, his work there is really. I'm pretty cynical and not easily inspired, but it's really hard to not be just inspired by it and the chutzpah of it, right? I'm going to go to Ukraine and I'm going to make a difference. And if we had, if there were like 1,000 people like Dave Morgan over there, Ukraine would be a world power by now.
100%.
So I do want to tell a story about using first party data, right, and how I think about it. So now this was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I was at IXI, and one of my coworkers there was a early investor in something called Renaissance Tech. About these guys?
Sounds familiar, like
yeah.
But there's so many companies named Renaissance.
Yeah. Well, you should Google it later. They're quite despicable. So Renaissance Technologies is a hedge fund.
Didn't go where I thought it was.
Yeah. Well, no, they're a hedge fund. They're a very early hedge fund, and they were started by Stony Brook professors. I was actually at Stony Brook probably around the time they started it. And what they realized was that they were all math and physics geeks, and what they take data about the stock market and using the mathematical techniques, the methodologies that they knew from physics and kind of abstract math, that they could apply it to the stock market. And so they went ahead and they founded a company, and they are the most successful hedge fund in the world that you never heard of because they don't take anyone's money. They kind of took money their first round, and then it's all house money after that because they're so successful. They're like, we don't want anyone else's money, right? We don't want to be responsible. And they're just literally like they're wildly successful. And if you read about them, the founders they fund Breitbart, right? It's like they're not lovely people.
Oh wow!
But super successful. But what he told me about the way they worked, he said, Ken, you're not smart enough to get a job there, which of course irritates me, but that's probably true. Because the way they think about the data is like they don't care what it is, right? It's just a pure math problem, right? They're just trying to solve. Given any random piece of data, like how do we solve stock price variability, right? How do we predict if stock price can go up or down? And so they don't really they say at the analyst level, they don't even know what the data is and they don't care, right? These are like physicists. And so I think about trying to, I care a lot about what the data represents, but I think a lot about that as a model, right? Around saying, look, what we really want is a system. The system should be indifferent to what the data is, right? As me as a user shouldn't be, but so I try to build systems that do that, and that's why when you talk about the first party data is the gold standard in my mind. Like that is it is interesting. It is signal, but it's signal with all the other stuff, and so the valuable part around striking it rich is being able to plug that data in just like it's any other data source, right? And do it seamlessly and smartly. And to not kind of build a system that is just using one company's first party data, right? It's building a generalizable system.
What is the biggest hurdle for personalized advertising now?
It's back to the identifier stuff. I think I'm a one trick pony on that, or one note piano, whatever it is. The thing that I think we're going to have to get our heads around is that most identifiers will be programmatically probabilistic. So I do think of a lot like the Nielsen model. I hate to Nielsen.
Do you think that Nielsen's just going to be the predominant company from now on? That all these other solutions just will not catch up?
I think that as a currency, they're a pure currency play. I think the hard part for the other vendors, they know who they are, but I think the hard part, I don't want to get. I'll tell you, I get angry mail from these kind of things, but I don't want to get mail from some of them. They want to be currency, but they're also in the activation game, right? And I think that it's hard to compete with your clients And so Nielsen benefits from being purely measurement and generally being trusted, even though kind of there's variability around the numbers. They're sometimes slow to move. I don't think anyone at Nielsen would disagree with that stuff. Um, but I'm a bit of a convert in terms of, like, my focus had always been in deterministically putting an ad into someone's on someone's web page, and I'm less strident about that, right? I'm actually, I think it's really, like, it's okay to think about it probabilistically, as given the kind of the size of the samples we deal with, as long as we kind of are transparent about how we are calculating the probabilities and such. So that's where I think that I think that we're going to have to get away from truly being deterministic. And frankly, this is a conversation Dave and I had yesterday. He continues to, like, bend my thinking on some of this stuff, because I'm very much like, hey, I know who Ken Rona is. Let's get an ad in front of him. I know what he wants to do. We're done. I think that as the privacy solutions get in place, regardless of if it's a privacy sandbox or Apple, like, we're just going to have to get comfortable with probabilistically reaching with television. Right.
What's something you're working on right now that you think is really visionary?
I got to do. I've known the Simulmedia guys for a while now. The thing that was most surprising to me was what they're doing with Player One, which is a think of it like an ad serving for gaming, right? It's
That's WON, not ONE. I should make that clear. It has nothing to do with the movie.
No, it's a kind of separate business, but part of the company. I think so what they do is they insert ads inside mobile and other games, right? Like PC games. So that there's a period of time where you're matchmaking. They'll put a 15-second ad there, and I think that as the gaming companies kind of get to be fully penetrated, they're going to be looking for new revenue. And I think Netflix has taught us anything. It's no matter how often you say we're never going to show ads, next thing you know, right, there's ads in stream. And now Amazon's doing it too. I expect that you're going to see the gaming companies have the same kind of realization that, we should actually just insert ads in. That's an additional source of revenue, and people don't mind it. Like, especially if it's free to play, right? Or rewarded video. So I think that's going to be an area where I was actually very excited to learn about. I think that's really neat. The other thing, I think, I had this idea, like, I was like 8 years ago. I wanted to inject. I was thinking about the VR. Maybe it was 5 years ago. I was thinking about VR, and I was like, you know what? You should be able to inject like an object into a space. Let's just say have a cylinder, and then Coke could kind of buy the Coke ad around the cylinder, right? Or a rectangle could be a Puma box or whatever, right? And you would be able to inject the ad, in effect the object into the space as an ad.
Dynamically,
dynamically, sure. And I was thinking, well, you could bid it, right? And, you could tie it into programmatic and all that. I was trying to talk David Helmlich. I'm sorry, David Helmlich. I always get David Helmlich and Adam Helmreich. I mess it up. But David Helmlich, who's at Innovid,
right? And Adam's at
Chalice. Yeah, he's the CEO
at Chalice, right?
But I tried
to mention before.
Yeah, I tried to get. He occupies a lot of my mind space. I tried to get Dave, and when he was between jobs, and it really was too early. But I think that's an idea that whose time will come. And I know that Omar from Blue Kai is working on that. Right, he was actually in the New York Times about it. So, frankly, John Nardone said to me, "Being too early is the same as being wrong." And so that's my curse. Is I've done this a few times in my life. I actually invented really early blogging software, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, no one's ever going to blog. This is the stupidest thing in the world. If I'd known what to do with it, we'd probably not having this conversation.
So changing topics a little bit away from tech, you've been in a lot of leadership positions with a compass that others haven't learned to read yet. What's your North Star for guiding you?
I just did this today for one of my new colleagues. I really believe in taking care of the staff, kind of almost above all else. A number of occasions I've done right by other people and wound up kind of in the short term hurting myself. But I'm not worried about kind of myself. I'm more like, hey, take care of them, and it'll be fine. And so I'd say that's that's kind of the number one thing I try to do. And I have kind of a set of principles. I try to be super fair. I try to be really transparent. I try to explain where we're going, right? So there's just some kind of stylistic stuff, but the core value is that these folks work for you, they trust you, and you should take care of them.
Do you have a gauge for your own level of ethics?
So ethics. So I'm pretty precise about this. Ethics is
would your mom be proud of you?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that I've asked myself that question since I was 17.
Right.
So when I'm doing something, if my mom is proud of me or not, and really the real acid test is if I want to explain it to my dad, because
right.
he was much more permissive than my mother. If my dad objected, then you knew it was really bad.
Point in your journey where you had to put yourself out there and stand alone?
Put myself out there and stand alone. Yeah, I'd say at AOL, we had a couple of moments like that, right? Because the business was in such turmoil when I was there, right? It was clear that broadband business was going down. And there was a particular business practice where what we would do is people would call in, or we would actually externally, we'd call, I think it was outbound calls. And we try to convince them to get off of our dial-up service and go to like AT&T DSL, right? It's high-speed lines. And every time we do that, AT&T would pay us, I don't know, $80, whatever it was. And so me and the finance guy, like I had the analytic team working for me, and we kind of did this. My finance guy and I did this process where we said, "Hey, I wonder what the lifetime value of that. Like, is that a good deal?" Was kind of the question.
Right.
And we found out it was a terrible deal. It was like the worst deal. Like we wound up figuring out, and this was a while ago, so maybe my numbers are off. But I want to say that it was like a $1.6 billion loss to the company in terms of free cash flow. Yeah,
wow.
And it was crazy. It was a crazy number.
Did someone lose their job?
No. So your point about standalone. The thing
Right.
that was crazy was me and the finance guy, Jamie, last name escapes me. Me and Jamie and I walked around the whole company. wasn't one building, it was a campus. We walked around the campus giving this presentation saying $1.6 billion in lost free cash flow in 3 years, right? And we would walk it around, and it took us another 6 months to convince people that this was a real number and that this was a terrible deal and they should stop broadband, and just waiting for them to cancel. And so that was
Wow.
it was by the time we were done, I want to say we saved the company $1.2 billion. And neither Jamie or I got a pat on the back. There was no one thanked us for that. It was actually a lesson learned that when you're doesn't matter how valuable the hard message is, people do not appreciate it.
I wasn't planning to ask this, but I have to ask you. And I remember when the AOL Time Warner building was built in Union Square, not Union Square, in
Times Square. I'm sorry, Columbus Circle.
Columbus Circle, right? And it was, and everyone, AOL Time Warner was going to be the biggest company in the world. What happened? I have to ask you, what happened to AOL? Why couldn't they transition?
It predates me a bit. Culturally, the AOL guys, but as I understand it, I got all I got was a story, right? I don't know if it's true or not, but the consensus story was that the AOL guys came in, and they were we know what we're doing, you guys don't.
Right.
And the Time Warner guys were a bit difficult, right? They were stuck in their ways and not super. There was no change management, right?
Right.
It was
all much older, if I remember too.
Yeah, that's right. And so they weren't going to take any kind of direction from the AOL guys. The AOL guys weren't coming in, and they weren't going to fire everybody and put in new management. They didn't know how to do that. And so they basically got stonewalled. And so then the performance tanked, and so then the Time Warner guys took over. I mean, God bless them. They knew exactly what they were doing, and so they didn't really know what to do with the AOL asset. But someone who, when I came in to Time Warner, the second time I was employed by them, not the AOL time, but the second time when I went to Turner, my stock price, I think I bought it my stock grants were at $35. And by the time we sold, it was at 1/8, or just not. It seems amateur hour to me. But
obviously, we're in a crazy industry. How do you prepare your team for this unpredictable industry?
I part of it is my role is to stay abreast of what's going on in terms of the context, right? So I can't tell you how many people I've taught about the MFA, right?
Right.
I taught a lot of data science people about MFA and how agencies work, and kind of some of what we shared here. So that's just me, sharing what little bit of wisdom I have. The other thing I think about is I really encourage them to build skills. So the things, I didn't get this from Munger, but I did read that Charles Munger said this, or maybe it was Buffett. The thing that people can't take away from you is what you've learned, right? Your skill sets. And so, I really try to make it so that I figure no one is going to retire from any job that I've managed them from. No one ever has, to my knowledge. No one has ever worked for me and said, I'm retiring today. And so I figure some people are going to have other jobs and they should be prepared in life. And so I try to make sure that people have a variety of skills, that they get a chance to build those skills, and that they do so in a safe manner. I try not to throw someone into something and say, "Oh, here, good luck," right? But try to, if we've got to tackle a new project that's like super critical, the person who gets that project is the person who has the skills already. For projects that are less critical, those are the projects that you can help people build skills and mentor them up and train them. So I try to kind of match this, the breadth of capability with the criticality of the project.
Are those real books behind you? Or is that
yeah.
Okay, so what would be, I'll let them get up, yeah. What would be your favorite book that had a profound impact on you from of those back there?
Well, there's a book called Information Rules by,
Okay.
I'm not going to get his name right, but he actually wound up being the lead economist at Google, or the head economist, or the economist at Google. And he's the guy. I have it over there. I can dig it up if I need to. But yeah, you might Google it and tell me who the author is. But that book changed the way I thought about how one uses data, how one the economics of data. That was kind of the first time I had ever read a book on data broadly, to be like, oh, I see. Like it laid it out in a way. I'm a behavioral economist. It laid it out in an economic framework, and really was helpful for me to think about how we should monetize data. And frankly, it's probably so embedded in me now, I don't even know I'm using it.
Is there something that you've learned in the last few years that it's very profound and changed how you view the world?
More personally, I think you may know I have a transgender child,
I don't.
and who had very severe depression, suicidality. Right.
Sorry to hear.
It's terrible. I may yet cry on the podcast. I may be the first crier in the podcast.
Yeah, we've been talking about the loss of cookies for a month, so no, you're not.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
I just assume when someone turns the camera off, they're back there crying.
Yeah, that's funny. And so the thing that when we were in the middle of all of that, right? I mean, when I say suicidality, I mean like it was hardcore, right? My wife and I had some very difficult times, as did my eldest son, as did my youngest son, who didn't have the same kind of mental illness, but it affected the whole family. And so that was a period of time. I'd say the thing that I learned the most out of it was to really try to be much less judgmental. You don't really know what anyone else is going through. Like, I'm pretty transparent about it, and people don't know that the family went through this stuff. Work colleagues who knew what was happening was like, God, I'm just kind of in awe that you're not like on the floor crying, which we were at home. I mean, but we didn't travel to work. So the thing that I think I've learned to do is just be less judgmental. When somebody's doing something that you don't understand why, like, they have a reason, right? It's not because they're an idiot. Well, probably not. But
some people are, unfortunately.
Yes, some people are. To your point, like, you know what? There are plenty, but the people I know, the people I interact with, usually there's a reason why. And so sometimes it's important for me to understand that reason, sometimes not. But in general, I try to be much less judgy than I think I was. Frankly, I think it's the big part of my personal evolution in my 50s has just being much more. I was always pretty tolerant, but I was also judgy. I'd say much less judgy now, and my patience for other people Judging is pretty low. I guess I judge the judgers.
You're tolerant of intolerance, or
Yeah,
intolerant of intolerance.
I'm intolerant of tolerance.
Before we go, I ask a text message to when you started in this industry. What would you tell yourself?
Oof. God, I'm pretty coin operated. I would have probably said invest in Amazon or something like that.
Yeah, we always get the investments.
Yeah, I will say I have thought a lot about like if you could go back in the past, what would you have done? I read science fiction, which is a big part of that collection, so that's a common.
Me too. Me too. I was involved with the whole scandal, and the lawsuit is now the editor at Tor.
Oh wow!
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, but I mean, of course, when they found out it was like a 20-year-old college student, and it was 50 emails and just a mistake. Yeah. But so I love science fiction too.
So I, at one point I had 2,000, sold a lot of them off.
Favorite author right now? I got a thumbs up with that. Yeah. Who's your favorite author?
I like Neil Stephenson. I mean, I think he's.
I just started reading some of his stuff too.
Yeah, I just recommended The Diamond Age. I listened to it recently, and that was really interesting to listen to it.
You listen to a lot of audiobooks?
Yeah, I'm more of a listener now. Part is as you get older, as you know, your eyes start to go. You're in the car, and so listening has been a good model.
I got told I have to have new lenses so I can read.
So actually, one of the things I'm really pleased about
special reader glasses now. Yeah, I'm getting at that age now too. It's kind of depressing.
So who's your favorite author?
Right. I mean, my favorite author of all time is still Isaac Asimov. I can't. It's partially because he saw the way the future would be. I mean, he talked about things like handheld devices. He invented the word robotics, and he himself was a scientist. He wrote science books. So when you read his stuff, albeit this is 50, 60 years ago, a lot of this stuff is really intense. I mean, I really like Greg Bear and the hard science fiction.
Yeah, me too.
I read a book recently called Elantris, which was interesting. It's a fantasy science fiction book. I forgot who the author is.
Alistair Reynolds. I've enjoyed him. He's hard science. You probably like. Also Ian, not Ian Sanders. I can't remember. Yeah.
And that's all, folks. Thank you to Kenneth Rona for sitting down with us. And special thanks to Troutman Amin LLP. Deserve to win when it matters most. Next week, we will have Jared Siegel, the CEO and founder of Attitude. Reminder that sponsors keep independent and witty journalism alive. We can't run this on rainbows and good thoughts alone.